When we're buying seed potatoes every year, it can get quite expensive. So we're going to have a look at options of how we can avoid buying the more expensive ones from online providers or from our local garden centres. For those of you who joined in with our potato grow along last year, you may have some potatoes left that you're wondering whether you can use as seed potatoes. If, however, you didn't join in and this is something you'd like to do, I will put the link in the caption for that video, which is the first one will be chitting, and then you can have a look at the other videos in that playlist as well. We can save our own potatoes each year and use them as seed potatoes. We're looking for potatoes that are over the size of roughly an egg in order to do this. And of course, we're looking for those that have stored reasonably well and that have no disease or pest issues that are obvious to them. So from what I grew last year, I have 4 different varieties that I'm looking to use for seed potatoes this year. I've first of all got my first and second earlies. So this is a second early, and you can see it has definitely sprouted and quite a considerable length on this sprout. I should have ideally took this sprout off, but we will do that now. Then I have my first early, and this is Pentland Javelin. The first one was Kestrel. And this one, once again, has sprouted, but not quite as bad as the second early ones. And that can be to do with the temperature they've been stored in, or just how long they've been out the ground. So those two have been out the ground the longest time. And then of my main crops, I've got this variety, which is Sunset, and you can see this one has got a sprout that's just over an inch. And then I have my other main crop, which is a King Edward that is just starting to sprout. So those two are perfectly good to still be used in the cooking, whereas these ones are starting to be a bit more shriveled up. They're a little bit soft, and they're definitely ready to start chitting now in order for me to start planting these around mid to late February, depending on the weather. Out of all of these, I've got one, which is the King Edward variety, which I'm not going to use to grow. And that's because this one is much darker than the rest. It's shriveled and it looks like it's maybe got some sort of disease going on. So there will be some that you'll want to take out. And if you are worried about them at all, then it's not worth growing them because we don't want to contaminate our ground or the pots that we're using and the other potatoes that could be going in those pots. This is the potato that doesn't look overly healthy, so I'm going to leave this one and pop him in the compost just because it doesn't look overly healthy. It also doesn't look the same as the other potatoes. It's a different colour, its skin looks different as well, and it just may cause us some issues that we don't need. So that one's going to be disposed of. And then for the other ones, all I'm going to be doing is removing any of these longer sprouts, but I am going to leave on any that aren't overly long because they'll be absolutely fine to be starting to go green when we put these in the light. So just giving them all a bit of a check as well, make sure there's none other that look unhealthy in any way. And then exactly the same as we did before, we're going to pop these into a basket and they're going to go on a windowsill where they're going to stay reasonably warm in the house, and they definitely don't want to go anywhere that we could have a frost. That will damage the potatoes and you won't be able to grow from them. So just laying them out and making sure that they get daylight will start the shoots that we are after. I'm going to do exactly the same with this other main crop variety. So only a couple of these have started sprouting, so they are all going to go ready to chit. These are the kestrels and these are the second earlies, and these are very long sprouts. You will often find the reduced ones in the supermarket like this. So if you do want a later crop of potatoes and to try that, then you can do it, but once again I would remove these shoots. If you are planting them really late, then just remove the longer shoots and get them into the ground as they are rather than chitting them. You can see that some of these are a little bit shriveled and they're a little bit soft. That's not a problem. It's not ideal necessarily, but they will grow absolutely fine and they will pre-sprout for us as well. Just going to pop this bag in between so I know which of these two varieties is which. So now I've got the Pentland Javelin, and I'm again going to remove the shoots. What we're after when we're saving these potatoes is really the size of an egg, and you can see this one's a little bit smaller, so it may not produce as well, but it also probably has shriveled a little bit as well since I saved it. So we've got a few different sort of varieties of size here, but all of these will be jitted and popped in the ground come February. So all these seed potatoes are now going to be popped into a light windowsill away from any risk of frost. If we do get a frost on these, then it will actually damage the potatoes. They go all watery and nasty, and we won't be able to grow them. So don't leave them in a greenhouse, a polytunnel, or a shed if you do have any risk of frost. Often buying our seed potatoes online, we first of all can only buy them from a lot of companies in sacks of 1 to 2 kilograms, and then we're limited with the varieties that we can choose, and it's maybe too many for how much space you have to grow. These can also be a little bit more expensive and can be sold out quite quickly. So there are a couple of options that we can look around for if this is your first year growing them or you haven't got any that you've been able to save. So my first suggestion here is going to be to look for a local potato day. This was originally brought about by an organic club that was concerned that our home growers weren't able to get hold of the varieties, and some of these varieties were going to get lost in history. So they started selling seed potatoes, and to their surprise, they were absolutely inundated with the people who wanted to buy them. And very soon, these seed potato days became part of a lot of communities. And you'll find that a lot of village halls and most counties will have umpteen different people that will be doing a potato seed day. At my local potato seed day, which is in Shropshire, we find that we can buy the potatoes, and there's a huge variety available as well on offer, and they're 25 pence per potato, which is much cheaper than the bags. But then if you're a member, you can actually get them at 10 pence per potato. So you can see that for the equivalent of what would maybe be £8 to £10 elsewhere, for £1 or two, you can get around the same amount of potatoes. So it is much cheaper. You'll also find that you have people at these potato days with experience of growing them, and they'll be able to give you a little bit of feedback. So that's definitely the first place I would look to be picking up seed potatoes cheaper. Next, you may find that some garden centres do actually sell them loose, and then this is really helpful if you're only wanting maybe 6 to 8 potatoes. That's all you've got the space for, and you just want to have a few pots going for yourself. And then you can pick them up reasonably cheap, but they are limited on their varieties quite often. And then another question that is often asked at this time of the year is whether or not we can use shop bought potatoes. So our supermarket bought potatoes, I would suggest that you don't buy these in order to use them as seed potatoes. There's a few reasons for this. First of all, they haven't been screened for disease and viruses that could cause any issues. Secondly, they may have been sprayed with something that inhibits their growth, so they're not going to sprout in the same way as others. And I did see a comment about this actually a few weeks ago and had to look it up. So the chemical that was used in order to spray these potatoes was banned in 2019. The potato farmers are now using different chemicals in order to spray the potatoes that aren't as effective. So you may find that they will sprout or that they don't last as long in the cupboard, and you may be able to grow from them. But once again, there will be other reasons that you may want to stay clear of these. They've also been washed, and that's not something that we usually want. And we need our potatoes to have had a period where they have rested before they're ready to start sprouting and growing again. So when we buy our seed potatoes, they have been screened, they have been checked for any issues with them, and they'll be hopefully the correct size for most producers. And they, of course, won't have been sprayed from different chemicals that we don't want on those potatoes. But if you have no other option and you really do want to pick up some potatoes locally and use them as seed potatoes, then my suggestion would be to pick up a bag of local or locally grown and organic potatoes. So locally grown means that they're going to grow well within your soil, within your region. They're not coming from Spain or wherever else. And then if they're organically grown, they haven't been sprayed with anything, and they usually won't have been stored for too long, or they're not freshly out of the ground at this time of the year either. And then the last place that I would look at is your local farmers market, and talk to the people behind the market and ask them whether or not they use their own potatoes as seed potatoes. If they do, then you know that the chances are that they're going to be completely safe. But with any potatoes that have not been screened, you of course do run the risk.